I hope the mic is on. Okay, greetings and welcome to another Pan-African Community News program. It's 23rd of October 2022. We apologize, I think we're running a little late in the studio with you and our wonderful host, Sister Oleander. I wonder if just double check that she's there and you can hear us okay. Sister Oleander, are you with us?
Greetings, everybody. Hope everyone's well this evening.
Excellent. Yes, she's here. So, as usual, you are welcome to communicate with us through the chats. We should be on Facebook and YouTube. So, just letting us know that you can hear us okay will be much appreciated. Now, there's quite a few stories to go through today, so I'm going to whiz through them as I usually do. I'm going to try and do this in hours. I apologize that we have started late. It is actually our son's 18th birthday today, so I want to big up my young man. It sounds really odd. He's still my baby, or our baby, our young son, Oleander and Mary Agbetu. Congratulations! It's a serious milestone, and yeah. And so, even though this is a quick bit of work we're doing now, in between the, I don't know what we call them, celebrations, it's been pretty low key. I don't know if you caught that shock storm, or we was out when that happened. We're really fortunate to get to the car in time. But anyway, enough of my domestic affairs. Let me get on with the news. Just let me know that you can hear us okay, that you can see us okay. I'm going to proceed.
Yeah, sorry, we've got a couple of greetings. We've got greetings from Mr. IC3 Black Race Code Chess saying greetings. And also we have Mr. Oh, so it's the same guy. Sorry, he's just saying okay to what you had said previously.
Oh, thank you. So that's brilliant. So we know that we're going out live and you can hear us okay. Appreciate the mic check. So let me get started. The first section, as always, is We Remember, where we pay respect to our ancestors. And our recently departed sister, Josephine Melville, passed away actually straight after performing a play in Nottingham Playhouse. She was 61 years of age. I'm not very familiar with these programs. I mean, I know what they are, but I haven't watched them. But I know her acting career was in EastEnders, The Bill, and Casualty, alongside many theatrical roles. So, I don't know much of the details other than that when she did collapse, she was treated by paramedics, but tragically she passed away at the scene. So the Nottingham Playhouse has paid a tribute to someone who's a wonderful actress and well-loved person. And so we remember you and hope your journey into the ancestral realm is a peaceful one. Another we remember, this one's from 2005. This is the young brother known as Isaiah Young Sam. He was 23 years of age when he passed away from a stab wound to his chest after there was some disorder in the cells in Birmingham on the 22nd of October 2005. So that's yesterday, several years back. I'm not going to go into the details. We know that he was killed by rampaging youths from the Asian community, and it was a very tragic time. Isaiah was an IT specialist. He worked for Birmingham City Council. He was an innocent young man caught up in a disgusting outbreak of what we call inter-ethnic violence. And I might touch upon this theme, that often when we talk about racism, we tend to look at whiteness and white supremacy as kind of like the chief perpetrator, but actually living under white supremacist systems often has other minority communities pushing back and very much so kind of leading to tensions between us, which are unexpected. Okay, so let me go to our UK general news. Sorry, we seem to have a few technical issues, just trying to solve them as we go ahead. So the first story is one of our sister Afoleke Dairo, and as you can probably see in the image there, she has been living in some horrendous. This is really strange. I don't know why that keeps doing that. She's been living in some horrendous conditions, which is where she has a hole in the ceiling, where she's got mold and damp, and she's often having to go back to the hospital because she has sickle cell, and that's made her condition worse. She has a grown son also with the condition, which is making the situation worse for her. The Hammersmith and Fulham Council are aware of this issue. I mean, they've given her some compensation, but she just wants to be moved into a place that's, what's that word? Habitable, somewhere where she can live safely without kind of having to inhale this kind of like this mold and this damp that's coming through that hole, literally, in her ceiling, which has been there for over a year. So we just want to talk on this story and keep our eye on it, because often what happens is that if people don't talk about these things, then you see local authorities often just brush them under the carpet. I mean, they've already paid her £150 for some of the issues with her bathroom, but this is a serious issue, and she really should have been moved by now, and it's now impacting on the health of her and her family. Another story which we touched upon a couple of weeks ago, and this is of the report by the University of Dundee into its enslavement links. Now, the university commissioned a report. It was called the Founders Project. It was authored by Cassandra Gupta from the University of Dundee, and it was several months of intensive research trying to find out exactly what was the university's role, what was Dundee's role in Britain's imperial past. Now, the researchers have concluded that even though the university was founded by a donation from a woman called Mary Ann Baxter, I think she gave them like 140, 150,000 pounds, that money was actually linked from profiteering from enslavement from Arthur. The Baxter estate, they weren't directly engaged in enslavement, but the money that they received and the profits were directly and indirectly linked to slavery. I've got to be clear. They weren't directly linked to the process of enslavement, but their profits and their finances and the funds that came through goods and sales of goods, which were clearly directly linked to enslavement. Anyway, so the university has said that we recognize that this is something we should try to make some kind of amends for. And so I think they've got a twinning project with a university in Malawi, and along with other universities, they're looking to set up programs to help students kind of like progress through and basically eradicate some of the hurdles that has led to the inequitable system of people of African heritage being excluded from universities. So this is the report. Again, I still haven't had a chance to read this report, but that is a summary of what has taken place. This is a story that probably won't surprise many of you who's recently had to use the NHS. The way politics has been working, it's kind of like talking out both sides of its mouth. So on one level, it's anti-immigrants, and it's send them back to Rwanda and kick them out of the country. Let's do the Windrush scandal. And on the other side, what it's saying through the back door is that actually our systems are crashing. We need your help. We need your expertise. So this is a story that came out last week about doctors who have been recruited for some of the world's poorest nations to work in British hospitals, basically for the NHS. And what's starting to emerge is that they're being exploited. In fact, it's got so bad, they think that they're so overworked, they're so overwhelmed with the work that they have, they're actually at risk of putting patients' lives in danger. And not because of their competence, just simply because they're tired. There's a policy that doctors shouldn't work for more than 4 night shifts in a row. They need a break. It's just a safe thing to do. But some of the new patients, the new doctors who have been recruited are saying that's not taking place. They're actually on the equivalent of almost like agency staff. Now, this has come to light through a BBC investigation. There was a private healthcare company that was which was finding recruits. There was a questionnaire put out to 188 resident medical officers, and they found out that 92% of them had been recruited from Africa, and around 81% of them were from Nigeria. So this is, something I had no idea was still taking place. I knew that nurses were being recruited from the Caribbean, from Africa, and from Asia. I had no idea that such an intensive brain drain was taking place, where doctors are being recruited from Nigeria. Now, the majority complained about excessive working hours and unfair salary deductions. And that's because they, like I said, they feel that they have no protections and that they had to take these opportunities. When they were recruited, it wasn't something that they could turn down. But now they think like they're, I think the word was, they feel like they're in a prison. They feel trapped by their circumstances. You're watching the Pan-African Community News Network, 23rd of October, 2022. Yes, it's 2022. In the studio with myself, brother Dr. Toyin Agbetu and sister Oleander. And we're just going through some of the news stories as it's affected our community over the last couple of weeks, but giving it a Pan-African twist from a UK perspective. Now, this is a tragic story, and that's one of the things I want to highlight. Directly links to the other story in many ways, is that one of the things that took place last week was that there was a flooding in Nigeria that killed 500 people. And alongside killing those 500 people, which we don't know their names, we don't have any details about, it also displaced around 1.4 million people. Now, this was caused by a dam that broke in the neighboring Cameroon. But the flooding that resulted from that dam was catastrophic. And there's a quote I have in front of me here. It says, "It's saddening. All of a sudden, people are left with no homes and turn to beggars in weeks, no matter how rich they were. The displacement has reduced them so much." This is a quote from Chiamaka Ibiano, a registered nurse who lives in Anambra State. The reason why this is a story I wanted to share, even though this took place in Nigeria, is because over the last couple of weeks, we've heard lots about protests dealing with global warming and the climate emergency. So there's been, the Stop Oil protests, which kind of like put a tomato soup over the Van Gogh painting and helped raise awareness to this very important issue. But I want to remind us that actually, when we think about climate emergency, we really need to think outside the Western Hemisphere. There's all this talk about fracking, etc., and all these are important questions. But if we need to understand why the brain drain is still taking place, then we need to consider the fact that these kind of impacts. This one was about a dam breaking caused by excessive rainfall. But that excessive rainfall is a direct consequence of the climate change and climate damage, and the activities of the global north. So there's a direct correlation between people being displaced from their homes and then migrating, a brain drain happening, and then once again, nations like in Africa, in Asia, and across the world, where people need those skills to help the people who live there, are being hemorrhaged in search of a better life, because their homes are just being made inhospitable because of these situations. So what's next? Well, we come back to the UK, and we find that, unfortunately, it's still business as usual. This is a story about, let me see if I can pronounce his name correctly, Ebehitali again. And he was a young man who was racially assaulted twice in a nightclub in Wales. It was filmed the last time, which is probably the reason why he was successful in getting a prosecution. It was a disgusting attack. A police officer said that it's the worst and most disgusting abuse he's seen in the 13 years of his time as a police officer. Now, the person who was responsible for this, Thomas Wilson, pleaded guilty to the racially aggravated assault and racially aggravated harassment, but he was handed just a 20-week suspended sentence by magistrates. Now, if it was just the first time, if it was just once this had happened, you'd think, okay, maybe. But if it's just twice, I think you'd be thinking, well, actually, there's something in this. This is the third time that he's assaulted and harassed our brother. And so to receive a suspended sentence really is not really good enough. And that's what our brother is saying. He's saying that there does need to be a harsher punishments for these kind of crimes, or it's actually you send a weak message. Perhaps it's the message that that these institutions are looking to send, but it does send a weak message, and it doesn't act as deterrent for racist abuse. In fact, it does the opposite. It says that racist abuse is just quite low down on the spectrum of forms of violence that we should just get used to. And so just to provide a little bit of context, and I can't even make this up, there was a new report that was put together by the University of Manchester and barrister Keith Monteith. And this has really raised some really urgent questions about attitudes towards racism in the justice system in England and Wales. And I say that because these attitudes are reflected in the practices that we see carried out by the judiciary. And we often forget that the judiciary wields enormous power over individuals, not just those like in the previous story who have been found guilty or who have admitted to actually committing a crime, but also all those who work in the criminal justice system. We're talking about from the barristers, from talking about witnesses, lawyers, defenders, everyone in that realm. And this report, which was a survey of around 370 professionals, legal professionals, out of that number, 95% of respondents said that racial bias plays some role in the processes or outcomes of the justice system. And 29% said it played a fundamental role. Now that's quite chilling. It's bad enough at 95% that there is some kind of racial bias in the system at play. But for 29%, it's almost a third, to say that actually it's a fundamental role, it's quite chilling. And it's not come from nowhere. The respondents are saying that they've witnessed one or more judge acting in racially biased ways towards the defendant and in their decision making. Perhaps the case I just spoke about is that. What we're hearing is racial discrimination by judges is most frequently directed towards African and Asian people and people from African communities. And so this is the most common target, apparently, of judicial discrimination, especially the young people. The young people were seen as the young group most frequently mentioned as targets of this kind of abuse in the system. So this is a really important report, just to be aware of the situation. Those of you who know me know I don't really like to keep talking about more and more reports giving doom and gloom news. But at the same time, we kind of need to have an idea of things are getting better or getting worse. And sometimes these research processes are the only way to actually get an idea of what it is that we're dealing with and what needs to change. I'll try and move out of that domain of the judiciary and move into the realms of sport now. And just to be clear, when it comes to these issues, that no one is safe. There is no space that we're safe. So the Spurs striker Richarlison recently had a banana thrown in while he was playing for Brazil, and I think it was in Tunisia. And this discrimination, which he's experienced as being a young person, is still present. The camera caught the footage of the banana being thrown from the terraces. And he just said it. I mean, he's dreaming of a day when racism ends. But until then, the punishment needs to be more severe. That's his words, not mine. Now, some people think, well, he's a footballer, he's earning loads of money, this is just part of the job, just put up with it. Why are you moaning about it? Well, actually, no. Racial abuse isn't part of the job. It shouldn't be part of the job. It shouldn't be tolerated as part of the job. And yes, he's a millionaire, but this is a case of another footballer who's actually trying to do the right thing, despite the massive disparities and the inequitable salaries that are given to themselves. So Richarlison gives up to 10% of his salary to help fund a support house in São Paulo in Brazil. And this project that he funds out of his own pocket assists cancer patients from a local hospital. And it gives free accommodation and food to those who arrive for treatment, especially those who can't afford sustenance. And so, he's actually putting his money where his mouth is. He also helps more than 100 families in his home city through its local football club. And so he's doing what he can. 10% of his salary. I don't know many people who give up 10% of their salary to help other people, just like every single month. But this is what he's doing. Does he deserve a banana to be flung at him while he's playing? Well, I say he's playing. He's at work. I don't think so. And I think that needs to be addressed with a robust approach, not just a kind of like, well, it's football, But we do know that, it is that we can stand up and we can raise these issues. And we saw that in 2020. We saw that during the pandemic, where I think Lewis Hamilton was one of the examples. There was before him was Colin Kaepernick. There's many sportssters who are starting to use their voice to actually talk about injustice. And I just thought this was a good time to remind ourselves that we are at the anniversary of the 1968 Olympics Black Power Salute, which was an amazing stance taken by Tommy Smith, John Carlos. And I should mention Peter Norman, who's there on the podium with them. He didn't raise his fists, but apparently it was his idea for them to use the gloves. And he also came out in support and was ostracized when he went back to Australia for giving them support. So this idea that even sportsters had to be silent is nonsense. This took place, like I said, during the Olympic Games, and it was part of the Olympic Project for Human Rights. And it was the right thing for them to do. And we do need to move back to a situation where sportsters are more engaged in challenging social ills, political matters, and actually putting their money where their mouth is when they can to help make the world that little bit better. But not everyone agrees, especially when we talk about nationalist discourses. Catherine Barblingsy, I don't know if I pronounced the surname right. Is it Birbal Singh? I think it is. She's the UK's mobility czar, social mobility czar, she's called. Well, she has a different approach towards dealing with racism. She looks at it from a position that actually by being proud of your ethnic identity, you actually make the ethnic majority feel alienated. You make them uncomfortable. You make racists feel like they've got justification to come out and attack you. So she has a cunning plan. Her cunning plan is that teachers of European heritage should teach minority ethnic children to sing the national anthem, even if it makes them feel uncomfortable. So if they need to talk about God save it was the Queen, it'll now be the King, and we should never ever be slaves, and all this kind of foolishness, then go for it. I don't really want to spend much time on this. All I want to say is that this is this government's social mobility czar, and with regressive attitudes and ideas such as that. And this is what we call this accommodationist, this approach where we completely work in subservience to systems of white supremacy. We never get change. We never see anything progress. No matter how high we climb, we are always reminded to know our place. And seeing that it's African History Month, there's no better example than what happened a few days ago to the UK's first African Chancellor in its parliamentary history, Kwasi Kwarteng. And I could gloat. I'm not going to. I could say I told you so. I will do. I told you so. Kwasi Kwarteng was sacked. He was replaced with Jeremy Hunt, who's as Chancellor, and who reversed all of his mini budget, all of his economic decisions. And he was let out to hang by his friend, former lover, the former now Prime Minister, Liz Truss, after being in the job for 38 days. Now, the Prime Minister, I think, made it to 44 days but he is probably the fastest. I mean, it's just what can I say? It's just an outrageous situation. History was made. He rose to the highest office in British politics, and he was reminded that no matter what he does, if he no matter how high he climbs, if he makes the slightest mistake, then he's gone. The latitude that's given to mediocre European males, like the Bojo, the clown, Boris Johnson, like the types of Jeremy Hunt, all of them, they can make loads and loads of mistakes. They can not even make mistakes and just be straight out corrupt and caught with their hands in a cookie jar. They can be sexual predators and abuse people for years, and they're not fired. It takes years and years before there's a negotiated retirement. But in this particular instance, Kwasi Kwarteng was fired and humiliated on a global scale. And all he did was follow the instructions of his boss. It was his ideas as well. But he followed the instructions. He did what he was told in servitude of white supremacy. And so while I can't say I agree with his politics whatsoever, I can say that it is a good warning of what happens if we follow the instructions of the social mobility czar and believe that we are, what's the phrase, whiter than white, by throwing our community, our ethics and our values under the bus. You're listening or watching myself, Brother Dr. Toyin Agbetu. I'm in the studio with Sister Oleander. We are live on YouTube and Facebook. It's the 23rd of October, 2022. Pan-African Community News Network or program. We're just going over some of the stories from the last couple of weeks. I think we're next going to deal with some UK health stories. And I'm going to start with one that we discussed a few months ago, I think, and this is the story of Dawn Butler. Dawn Butler was diagnosed as having cancer. And she thankfully was diagnosed early enough. But she's now running a campaign to help, I think it's 1 million women to become diagnosed, because she's found that there are, kind of like a whole realm, a whole load of women who are unaware that they could potentially have cancer. And if they're not diagnosed soon enough, then what happens is that it places their life at risk. This story in particular has, I don't think the slide has moved. My apologies. Let me move that there. This story in particular is also dealing with the issue that when Dawn was told about her cancer, she was informed through a withheld phone number. And people might think, well, what does that mean? But if you read Dawn's piece, article, it's a very good piece actually, she makes it clear actually, to be told this news, that there's something wrong, you need a biopsy from a withheld number, is really inhumane. I don't think she used the word inhumane. I used the word inhumane. But what she does talk about is that you can't prepare for it. And this is not the way things should be done. And she wants to change processes like that so that can never, ever happen to another woman. You see, at least if the call comes in from your GP or from the hospital, you see that, then you can sit down, put yourself in a space and get ready to hear what you're going to hear. But when it comes from a withheld number, then actually it just becomes a matter of routine, as if it's just, cold selling, what they call them, telemarketing call. You have no idea. And to find out that way about this bad news is actually, like I said, it's quite cold and callous. So anyway, the campaign she's launched is called Find the Million, and and she's talking about the missing mammograms around the UK to make sure that women are aware that early screening can actually help save their lives. Another story linked to health, and again with African women. this is a new story, but it's not a new concept. And this is really about the fact that the frequent use of hair straightening products, what we call chemical hair straightening, or products, put women at higher risk of developing uterine cancer. I mean, it's really as simple as that. Many people don't quite get it. And this is a new study that kind of looked at it from a slightly different angle. They make it clear that even they found out that that the straightener, or chemical straighteners, and uterine cancer kind of like was more increased. Sorry, the risk of uterine cancer after using the chemical straightener was increased. They found that they couldn't say that there was an ethnic determinant. So basically, they couldn't say that if you was of African heritage that this increase happened. They did find disproportionate number in African women, but they put that down to the fact that we are more likely to use chemical hair straighteners. So, the researchers are quite clear. Hair products contain hazardous chemicals. They're endocrine disrupting and carcinogenic properties. This is not really news. I did a documentary a few years that we spoke about this. But no previous study has actually investigated a relationship with uterine cancer. And so that's what this brings to the table. So a lot of women are probably watching this and thinking about, oh God, I've heard all these scare stories. But just be mindful. Sister Oleander.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I remember when I used to straighten my hair, or relax, as we used to call it, relax your hair. And to be honest, it was a far from relaxing experience because of the burn. But I remember as soon as I got pregnant, there was just something about it. Using that chemical was just not okay anymore for me. Obviously, different women do different things, but I just felt that it must, on some level, penetrate through to the bloodstream and therefore to my unborn baby. So I made that decision at that point to stop. And actually, I just never went back into it. So I just wanted to say that if there is a study that says this, then it's not a surprise. Most African Caribbean women know that this does something quite drastic to our hair, and the fact that it burns so badly as well. There must be a reason why. So yeah.
No, thank you for sharing that. And that's a good point. It provides a really useful context, because the research that we already have knows that there's an increase of risk with breast and ovarian cancer. So now we can add uterine cancer to that list. I don't know what else it's going to take. But I know many people think that this is just kind of like a cultural purism, just kind of like trying to police how women present themselves and how they look themselves. I think it's probably far better to probably use a wig than it is to actually do this to your scalp, your skin, and like you said, to your internal organs by using these products. But this is, like I said, this is recent research. This is not me talking about this. I'm conscious as a man that some people might think I have biases, even though if you remember coming to America, the Stay Glow movement, African men were at one stage in our history also carrying out these toxic practices. Thankfully, you sisters said, actually, we don't need you to put that stuff in your hair. We'll still date you. And so we kind of abandoned it. I just wish we did it the other way around now. Anyway, let me move on and let's start discussing something that, unfortunately, there's always something to talk about, which is not exactly the position I'd like to be in, but UK policing matters. So the first story, I'm going to keep this short, is you might have heard that the Metropolitan Police Force tried to scrap the initiative where it has to record the history of drivers that are stopped. Now, you know, I mean, I'd say tried to, because it did stop it, and then the whiplash, the people that pushed back against it was so far, so strong, they actually did a U-turn. But initially, they were trying to scrap recording the data of who they stopped, ethnicity data of who they stopped, despite the fact that African people were 56% more likely to be stopped than European people. So they knew this. They're using a lot of excuses. Some officers were saying that recording the ethnicity of drivers took too much time. It really added another couple of minutes. And there's been research from Dr. Posh at UCL who actually said that, you know what, the highest level of disproportionality was actually for African and Asian drivers. So you have to record this. You know, I mean, what she didn't say, or they didn't say you'd have to record this, but it was implied that, you know, this should really be recorded. But anyway, either way, it's a non-story, because it came out for a couple of days. Pushback came, and this is probably when social media actually did good. And they've dropped that for the time being. So they are going to continue to record ethnicity of drivers. And I can only say, yeah, I mean, the disproportionality that takes place on the streets is bad enough. We don't want to hide any of this stuff if we want to resolve it. Talking about resolving stuff, this is quite, you know, again, this is not something that I really enjoy having to talk about. When Oladeji Adeyemi was, it's so difficult to phrase this one, because he was hounded to death. I won't say the police officers killed him. I won't say they murdered him. I will say they hounded him to death. I will say that they were engaged in an act of what looked to me as malpractice. They showed no attention to his distressed state, his well-being, and they tasered him to death. I think we spoke in the last program about how the family found out about his death through social media. But now the family are saying they're going to take legal action against the police watchdog, which is the IOPC, for failing to criminally investigate the two officers involved. I don't know if it's going to come to anything, but they've got to try. It's quite tragic to find out that the officers involved are still out there, still engaged with the public, despite us seeing their callousness, their ease of use of pain as a form of compliance for someone who's in pain. We can't forget how the IOPC issued statements that were not only incorrect, but were racially biased, and argued that he was armed with a screwdriver, when we found out actually it was a fire, what you call it, a lighter. So yeah, I mean, that's this story really. There's not much more to say to it, that they're challenging the IOP's decision not to hold a criminal investigation into his death. And they say that decision was unlawful and irrational. I mean, we can only wish them the very best with this. But I think many of us know that using the judicial system, and we just spoke about a report that shows racial bias in the judicial system. So using the judicial system to expose racism and irrationality based around ethnicity is a very difficult job and task to achieve successfully. Gosh, this is going to be the last story on the police. This is the case of a young 13-year-old who, September 2018, so it's a legacy case, but we're talking about it now because we've only had the outcome now. The young boy, he's African, dual heritage, just had his hair cut, was out with his mate cycling home. Police car suddenly saw him and his friends and chased them, you know, kind of like they were pretty petrified and fearful of being run over. The two males got out, grabbed them, handcuffed them, and dropped them to the floor. Now, this is a 13-year-old boy, right? 13. Now, the police will say that the boys were released after 10 minutes, and the officers are insisting that they didn't detain or search them, even though that's been disproven. They didn't even record the footage, which is a really clever tactic and a common tactic with these kind of offences. The only reason we know about this is because one of the friends of the boy was filming what happened on his phone. But the police officers turned off the phone when they were engaging with the minors and the children. So the family have finally got the Metropolitan Police Force to pay out this £6,000, kind of like a settlement. But the boy's mother is actually a serving police officer. And she's the one who said, she doesn't want to be named. So she's the one who said, I'm going to take this case on the way and keep fighting. And she's the one who says that actually, if my son had been European, this wouldn't have happened to him. Now, the matter of saying that, yes, we made this payout, but there's been no discrimination component to this complaint. But that is what this complaint was all about. I just need to set the record straight. So even though if 100 years from now, people look at this case and look at the records of what these male officers did to that young teenage boy, even if the records don't say anything about discrimination, doesn't say anything about racism, this case was definitely about racial profiling. It was definitely about the abuse of power. And even though the police have paid off, or made a payment to settle this case, our children are still facing these conditions on the streets of the UK. This is in 2018. I say they're still facing it now, 4 years later, in 2022. Now, time is running short. We are 2 minutes to 8. So I'm going to share some good news stories. I did have some African History Month events that I wanted to share, but I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to cut this program short. I apologize. I know that we started late and that was our fault, not your fault. We'll do better in a couple of weeks' time, the next program. But let's see where we can go from here. So the first story, good news story, is one of Desiree Azumudi. And this is the mother who started an inclusive toy brand after the birth of her first child. And she just said she wanted to create a toy that represented her son. She just felt she wanted a better, positive representation of her son, in a toy that he's played with. Because she was saying that when she was growing up, she recognised that she didn't have access to all these things, and so that's what she's done. She's gone out. She's from Hornchurch, I think that's in Essex, and she's created Little Oma. And she has I think there's puzzles and books and posters, and she launched the company in September 2020. But she's still going strong, and this is a good story to share, just as a reminder of the fact that we have the capabilities, we have it within ourselves to be entrepreneurial and solve some of these social injustices, to solve these inequalities, to do the work that's required to ensure that we can actually look at ourselves in the mirror and actually love ourselves. Basic fundamental human right. I mean, why should we always feel like we're less than, that we are not good at? And why should this start with our children? So I just want to big her up during African History Month for doing this work. Someone else I'd like to give a big up to, and again, it seems like we've got a football focus this week, but we haven't. I'm not very good with football. Anyone who knows me will know that. But I do want to make a comment about Newcastle's Joe Wilcox, who really, it was just a lovely story here, where it's just made it clear he wants to help the youth of Montserrat. That's where his heritage is, that's his people. He also wants to pay back Eddie Howe for his guidance. He's the manager of his club. He says that his family has a lot of land out there in Montserrat, and he really wants to build something there to give opportunities to the young people who don't have the chance to come to Europe and play football like he did. Now, he's only 23 years of age, and yet he's talking like this. He's saying it's very important that I give something back. And he's going to. He says that he's himself, his family are already working on the plans. And so, we often hear about the negatives of these footballers, these grown men that carry on like basically spoiled brats. But here we have a case of a young brother, Joe Wilcox, who's actually saying that he was inspired by the actions of Marcus Rashford. He thinks what he did was amazing, and he's following in his footsteps. And he saw the government U-turn on the food poverty campaign, and he wants to do the same. And I call this a good news story, because I think that there's any action that inspires more people in the space that you are to get involved, to do something to help others, is always a good thing. It always is a reminder that everything's not hopeless. So that's another good news story. And the final good news story for this program is one of the London schoolgirl, Tianalke Are. Now, she's an 8-year-old who actually just did the simple thing of, I say simple, but the amazingly simple but inspiring thing of writing a book about her hair in its natural form. And she just did so because she wanted to inspire other young people to be inspired to love who they are. And she's 8, and I love that. She's from South East London. The book's called My Afro, Twin Best Friends. It was initially published in December 2021, so she actually wrote it when she was 7, but she's 8 now. I just think that we should end on good stories where we remember that the agents of change come from unexpected places. It's not just the old boring big mouth, scholar activists or community educators like myself, long in the tooth, but also just young people, like Tiana, like our footballers, giving back 10% of their salary to Brazil, another one to Montserrat, using their land to build opportunities there. We all have a role to play in actually making the world a better place and challenging injustice. So that's it really for this week. Like I said, there was a whole load of events. We'll have to find a system to kind of share that. Maybe we'll bring the newsletter back. I don't know how to do this. I don't want to put more work on. But let me see if Sister Oleander's with us. And
yes, I'm here.
Good. Okay, great. Is there anything you want to say before we sign off? Or?
Well, just to say that without the support of the community, it would be extremely difficult to bring these programs to you. So we do really appreciate all the support that we get. And keep safe, stay safe, and let's see what happens in this country, because it's going to the dogs. I've always said that. Anyway, so good night, everybody, and stay safe.
Yeah, I mean, we come back, the country will have another prime minister again. So I just want to echo the words of Sister Oleander. We can't do this without you. Give thanks to Brother Colin, Sister Leona, those supporters out there, our community, for listening, sharing, and supporting, and also those of you who are international listeners. I'm humbled by the fact that some of you are now taking our footage and sharing it around the world, or taking extracts of the stories, so people are aware of what's taking place here to us in the UK. And hopefully with some time we'll be able to reciprocate. It would be great to have little packets, little news clips from those of us who are actually outside these aisles, so we can actually have a dialogue amongst each other. But I'm going to close there and say we'll be back in a week's time. Is it a week's time? No, it's not. In 2 weeks' time. That's probably what, 7th of October, 7th of October, November, 7th of November, something like that. 2 Sundays from now. There you go. So I'm going to say, as ever, thank you, and may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.
Ashe.